Welcome to another Sidewalk Conversations. My name is Pete Van Ward, and I'm your host. And we have another great guest joining us today, back from season 1. We went back when we were doing live broadcasts. And so excited to have him back, and I can't wait to introduce him to you. I would like to just introduce our conversation today by sharing a little bit about what it is that I find to be most impressive when it comes to the life of individuals who are trying to walk out their faith. And we could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about the love factor. We can talk about the fact that they are committed to truth. But one of the things for me that is most impressive is somebody who's been at it and stayed at it for a long time. You know, and the thing that happens often in Christian community is you have the great comeback story. So maybe a person started around the church, had their rebellious season, and then they come back, and it's like the lost sheep that's been found, and everybody's cheering. And I love those stories. It's actually my story. But what I actually find more impressive is those folks who can say, you know what, I found the Lord early in life, and I didn't need to go to all these other places in order to decide that this is what I wanted to do. And my guest today is one of those guys. Like, he's walked the walk from early on, and he stayed on the path. It's not necessarily the story that gets the most applause, but in my mind, it's one of the ones that are most impressive, because it takes a real courage to be able to say no to the things that the world is inviting us to do. And you save yourself a lot of grief when you stay faithful to the path. And so that's what I want to encourage those of you who are watching, who, you know, you wonder, like, is my story important? Like, have I been okay? I don't have a great testimony, so to speak. And I just want to encourage you that this story, one of the reasons I want to tell this story is because it reminds me that there's something beautiful about staying strong from early on and persisting through. So that's what our guest has done, and I can't wait to have you hear his story. All right. Well, I wanted to first of all say thank you to our sponsor today. Our sponsor for this broadcast is Pickleball Kingdom. That's actually the place where we are doing the recording. The owner has graciously and generously made space available for this studio, and I just want to acknowledge his generosity and also promote the Pickleball Kingdom activity and facility. They have beautiful courts here. It's located in Pflugerville. And so if you are in the Austin area and you are looking to either, play and learn or play and grow in your game, this is the place to do it. Pickleball Kingdom, 1900 East Howard Lane. You got to come and see it. It's a beautiful space with great courts and a great community. So thank you, Jared, for your sponsorship. And if you're looking to check out pickleball, this would be the place to do it. All right, well, without any further ado, let me introduce you to my guest, Preston Jackson. Woo!
We're going to have to get you a little, cheer track button.
Preston, you might recognize the name because he's usually the guy on the other side of the camera. He's the one that kind of makes everything look good and sound good. And I've kind of been on his case a little bit for the last season or so to say, hey, it's time for you to come back. We gotta do another interview. And so he's agreed to do that with me. Thank you.
Yeah, because you've been desperate, so.
Yeah, we're like running out of gas.
There's no one, yeah.
Preston,
everyone's starting to say no. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, I have to be like, I want to give Preston a compliment because not only is he doing the podcast, which is not necessarily his, most comfortable place. But he's actually wearing a really cool shirt.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he's trying to impress the hosts with his Amsterdam
Yeah, I
shirt.
can't. Normally I'm back there with my Fabletics and my raggedy T-shirt. Had to look a little nicer today.
You're looking very
thank you,
sharp,
thank you.
brother. All right. Well, as I was saying in the intro, one of the things I respect about you, of many things, is that you have been a person who was raised around the church from very early on. You and my niece Danielle, I think, were like buddies back growing up.
No, not so much growing up.
Really?
No, well, because she's a few years older than me.
Oh, okay.
She didn't want to have anything to do with me.
Oh, early on.
Early on.
Then you became cool, and
yeah. Later when we were doing Celebrate Recovery together, and after we were both done being teenagers, kind of deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you did grow up around the church. I do know
did.
that much. And your family is all very active
They are.
in the church.
Enough that I called you Uncle Pete for the longest time until I finally met you. Yeah, but no, my family has been there. Because my mom, I was 6 months old when my parents started attending
Okay.
Shoreline, and so 26 years later, they're still there, and
And you're still
I'm
there?
Still there.
You've worked there.
I've did my time on staff. Almost all of I've got all my 5 siblings, and us, and both my parents. All of us have almost been on staff at some point at Shoreline.
That's so cool.
I think we've got one more to. Technically, my brother, he'll find something in the next few years. He's just getting to. He's only 15, so
Yeah, well, he'll find his way.
he's technically now he can do it.
All right, so let's lean into that a little bit. I know on our last podcast, which was a live podcast, so we don't have any record of it anymore. And
Thank the Lord. I was right out of COVID. I was like, if I can't do anything, I'm not gonna go get a haircut. So I had a year's worth of hair. It was my beard. I didn't cut my beard because my hair was growing. My mother was absolutely horrified. So as long as that footage never surfaces, we'll be fine.
Okay, so tell me a little bit, like, some would say that was a good thing that you were raised around the church. I certainly see it as something that, served you well. But there's also the downside. So let's deal with both of those things. Like when you look back at being raised at the same church, kind of going to the same church, being on staff at the church for a while, like what are some of the benefits of that experience? And then maybe what are some of the things that kind of you would go, well, wasn't all great.
Well, I guess right off the bat, being, my dad was on staff, and they key volunteer before that. And so he was very involved for probably a decade. And my mom too was, she's volunteering, and she was like a preschool coordinator, and she very active in the kids ministry. And so people over there knew her, but she's quiet and reserved. My dad is, very outgoing and very extroverted and talking to every single person. So it's like growing up, it's, oh, you're one of the Jacksons, or you're Anthony's kid. So, and everybody knows who Anthony is. So everybody knows who you are. And so I didn't necessarily grow up a pastor's kid, but I did grow up kind of in that same vein of,
right.
I can't go anywhere in the church without somebody knowing me, somebody, always worried about getting a report getting back to my parents about what I was doing, or and that had some interesting, gave me some interesting made me self-conscious in some ways about my spiritual development.
Okay.
Which was interesting, but that kind of came later. But I mean, the benefits, being a part of a church for so long, even today, the connections I have with people, a lot of the business that I'm doing now, I know it's people I've met at Shoreline or I've known forever. I'm working with, I'm working with the man who was my kids pastor, kind of he did Sunday school for, I think 6 years of my life, and now I'm working with him as a colleague, and that's interesting. And so it's been longer I've been a part of it, the more I have these connections with people, and a community that I also notice that other people don't have in that kind of way, right? And also just being entrenched somewhere for so long, even the new people, because you said, I was working at Shoreline up until a couple of years ago, but even now, the new staff hires all know who Preston is, because that it's the legend lives on, and like I'm still there, and they're like, oh yeah, and they're like, oh, this is Preston, I've been hearing so much about you, and I'm like, it's been 2 years, what are they still talking about? It's got to be negative.
All right, so is there a downside, like when you think about it?
I mean, I think you give me a lot of credit for my faith walk, and I don't necessarily even think about it the way that you perceive it, because I am not, I'm staunchly not an evangelical. You know this about me, and I try to walk back that part of my past, and so like, and from that perspective too, I got some experiences. Like my great grandmother has been serving at a church for a long time. She plays the organ, and it's a First Christian church, and so like I got to have some experiences in the First Christian church growing up, like Christmas, or like when we were out of town on a Sunday.
Yeah.
But like the biggest thing about being in one church is is experiencing that. Like for me, I think a big drawback is only experiencing that tradition,
Right.
and having to intentionally seek out other traditions. And even at this point, my understanding of other Christian traditions is more academic and observational, and like I don't have I've never sat in a Presbyterian service, or gotten to experience what some of these other denominations have, in a way that I think I might.
And you're the one who likes to color outside the lines.
I do. I love to color outside the lines, and I have a big passion of mine right now is the different is like understanding the impact that tradition has. And like, I guess partly growing up in the more modern evangelical tradition is that there are no traditions. And so it's something that, I've had to try. I'm working on reclaiming in my own spiritual walk, having what are my spiritual traditions, or what traditions do I want? And then just even understanding like why. Because I think too, a lot of the problem in the modern church is that there are no traditions. There are traditions, but people don't acknowledge them as such. They want to tear down all the traditions.
Like I'm not traditional.
No, right. But then that thing that you do that's not traditional is now your tradition, right? But there's just something so important to tradition in spiritual formation and the passing of salvation from generation to generation, right?
Yeah. So what, like, I want to explore, and I appreciate you saying or clarifying that, hey, look, I still am in my own discovery process. I didn't necessarily stay like rigid in the way that some people might think. And so you've had your own like questions and deconstruction of certain ideas and kind of rebuilding. But essentially, at least from an observational standpoint, you have essentially stayed within the path.
Whose path, Pete? Who's defining?
I mean, you're still looking to Jesus. You're still like worshiping Him.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
You didn't go into super rebellion.
I didn't say no Jesus for the sake of not, because I had to. That's true.
So what do you attribute that to? Like what enabled you to stay relatively within
because I mean, like, since I was 16, I have never had a doubt that Jesus exists and that he's somebody worth following. But that was also the culmination of its own spiritual walk. Like, I think when I was like 12 is when I kind of like can start to, like, in my memory, pinpoint things. But like, that's when I was like, do I believe in this Jesus thing? Why do I go to church every Sunday? Do I agree with my parents? Do I hold their religious beliefs? What are religious beliefs? Right?
Yeah.
I think and that's a really natural.
You've always been like this philosophic, deep thinker.
I can't say I was that deep, but like you back then. But now I can, I also know now it's really normal. Cause I mean, like last time I was on, we just talked about youth ministry, because that's what I did for so long. And like doing youth ministry, understanding like the developmental stages, and like now I can look back and I'm like, okay, that's completely normal developmental. Like I'm rebelling against, I'm in my own way reevaluating everything I believe about life, and that's the thing, right? That's what everybody does. But even in that, like, I was like, okay, do I want to believe? Do I not want to believe? I have always been very analytical and philosophical and scientific. I was going to go and be a scientist, and that's what I wanted to do from a very young age. My mom still talks about the time that I tried to turn her car, or tried to figure out how to make her car run on hydroelectric power when I was like 6. And so, like that also played a factor because I was like, I've always, always hearing the intellectual or anti-scientific bias in the church as well, like or even from the other side, like the science, the intellectual side of like, oh, religion does, the typical kind of like, religion isn't real, we've got science. And so in living in that, and so hearing those arguments and taking them in and then evaluating for myself. But it started when I was like, probably 12, 13. And in that process, I kind of made a decision really young. It was tough. I went through times where I didn't believe, times when I did believe. Also, it didn't really matter if I believed or not, because why? If there's no God, then it doesn't matter at all. So why am I struggling? And then I made a decision at one point. I don't remember how old I was. I was probably 14 or 15, and I was like, you know what? Of everything I know, I'm just gonna believe, because this seems like the best course of action, and a little bit to hedge my bet. Right?
Just in case.
Just in case. And like, if God is real, then at some point I'll find him, and I'm going to choose to believe until then. And so it was a really conscious choice to like every day just choose to believe. And then that culminated into an experience a couple of years later when I was 16, where I found myself meeting Jesus, and from that day on, I've never had a doubt. And so
I can't talk about that.
It was this classic summer camp moment. I've been, choosing to believe, waiting, and I was praying, and I was like, everybody talks about the Holy Spirit and feeling God, and like I've never felt that, and I want to experience that, and God, I want to feel your Spirit, and I want to feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. And through that summer camp, there was a couple of, each night something different happened, and I went through, even through that, I look back on it, I'm like, I experienced kind of 3 different aspects of God in that until, I think, I don't know if it was the last night or whatever, but I remember so back to everybody knows who my dad is, and my dad also did youth camp for years and years and years and years and years, and I made him keep doing youth camp when I was in youth ministry. And so even especially in the youth ministry, everybody knows who Anthony Jackson is, and my leaders knew who he was, and it was a hard thing for me to explore my more spiritual side and like doing things that I felt like might get reported back. Right. I can't be expressive in worship because I don't want to talk to my dad about that. I want to do my own thing, being a child of 6 too, I want my own thing. I don't want to, I don't want a lot of attention brought on me either. Cause and so that was a barrier. And there were several times when I'd be like, and I would be in worship, and I'd be like, I have a feeling like I should do something, I should take some action, and I'd be like, no, I can't do that. What if somebody notices?
Yeah.
And so that summer camp, I was finally like, you know what, I don't care. And from in that moment when I kind of surrendered, I had, like a throne room kind of moment, and I saw God and saw Jesus and had a really powerful encounter.
Wow.
That I was like, well, now nobody can tell me God doesn't exist because I've seen him.
Yeah.
And
love that.
Yeah.
Now you later, in fact, this was, I think it was close to when I first came on staff. You made another decision where you were basically given an opportunity to go to a very prestigious school. Had been
You say very prestigious, but nobody would know what the school is.
Well, because the academic standards were really high, and you, maybe I'm speaking too glowingly of it, but you passed with flying colors. I mean,
I did get in. I'd actually coincided with that. No, look, it was with the summer camp. A different summer camp, because then I had a different issue of like, and something I've completely unworked since, but, I'm thinking, that I'm, looking for God's one exact plan for my life, and like, he's got something figured out already. Don't have to get into that, but, so that was a tough thing, because I was just like praying, because I graduated, I think it was a couple years before you got there, because it was when I graduated high school. I was looking to go to college. UT was my first choice. I didn't get in. I didn't want to go to the CAP program, so I only applied to 2 schools, one in Texas and then one in the UK. And the UK has a later start date, later admission, so I hadn't, I'd been graduated for a couple months before I finally got my acceptance letter, and so I got that one like the week before summer camp. So I went into summer camp having been accepted to college, but still like, God, is this what you want me to do? Like, kind of stuck in a decision paralysis, but like also just like waiting on God. And I got some really good advice from someone right before I went to summer camp. And they're like, sometimes God tells you what to do, and then sometimes God leaves it up to you, and it's your decision to make. And I was wrestling with that idea, and I also, in that moment, I heard, I had a really clear hearing God say, like, whichever direction you want to go, I'm going to go in with you. And so it's also at that, so I did get in, and then I was doing that, but also at that time I had started doing Celebrate Recovery with Danielle, and we were doing the landing, and I was working with middle schoolers, and I was, a senior, but my heart really broke for them when I was doing childcare at the time. Really, even we were doing Celebrate Recovery, but I was like the childcare employee. That's how I was making money. But we were doing the lessons, and I would sit with them, and we talk about their lives, and we would talk about their struggles, and it was just like, my love for them, and then the life that they had to lead, and also, I just was like, I want to do this. I want to sit with students and talk to them about their life and help them figure out how to.
So you put that other thing all on the side.
And so I said, I was like, God, I want to do this. And I was like, I want to go this direction, and kind of, I'll go where my heart leads. Cause I do, it was a hard decision, cause I also love school. I love academia, and someday I'm still going to finish my degree. But I had gotten accepted into an honors physics program, and I was, because my goal was to study quantum mechanics and get my PhD. So like there was like this whole different track of life basically to go to the UK and study abroad, and get my degree, get my undergrad, get my graduate degree, do my PhD. Probably end up like a coder or something, because that's really all physics degrees are good for these days. But maybe work on a really cool project. And so like or become a professor. That's something I did want to do too. So that was our whole track one direction. And who knows what would have happened in that direction too. But then there was this whole other track of like doing ministry and like.
And I think the reason it stuck with me so much was because, people talk about like I want to touch people's lives. I want to, and I love it. I think that's an awesome aspiration. But there's also in your situation, I thought, well, for him, it was like a real either or choice. Like you could have been successful at this other thing, and not everybody has those opportunities. And so the fact that you said, I'm going to put that on pause, not to say that you might, you may still do it someday. But the fact that you said, I love these kids. I want to do ministry. I'm willing to lay that down. I just thought it was so cool, so impressive. Loved it.
Yeah.
Nice work.
It was not the most selfish choice. It was something that, it was an easy decision to make, because that's something I loved and wanted to do. And, I wasn't all pious and like, I'm going to put aside my cares and my desires for the work of the gospel. It was,
oh yes, it was. That's the image I'm holding on to.
It was, this is where I want to be right now.
Well, I think there's something to that too. I think the Lord does, like, I love how you said it. I think the Lord does often give us the opportunity to say, well, is this what you're excited about? Like, do you love this? Because I'll go with you. Yeah. I mean, unless it's like evil.
Yeah. We talk about walking that back. I'm more embracing of that idea now, that like, even before, we don't, as is going down a rabbit hole, but even before like, where does God want us to be? I more believe that wherever we go, I have a deeper understanding of that idea of wherever we go, God is with us, and a primary belief in that, like, first he's with us, and then he'll make it work, and then if we're willing to listen, he'll guide us to places that he has designs or that are good for us, right? Yeah. But there's like I think we make it too much either or, in my opinion. If you go off on the wild side, God's still with you.
Amen.
right?
Yes. Yeah, he is.
Right?
That's
There you
what
go.
that's all about. All right, so let's. What are you doing now? Like you're like entrepreneuring now. You gotta
I have
you
to.
help
I'm
me.
trying
You
to.
help me.
I'm still working on explaining that to people. I'm trying to get it down to my like 60-second small talk,
Uh-huh.
because there's so many things I'm doing. Been working on the podcast with you. Been doing my own consulting work and like marketing. That's a weird shift that I never expected. When talk about like directions life could have gone. When I was 18, I would never have imagined that I would be doing marketing, or much less like running and kind of, a two-man agency and doing consulting work with people, because like I've got clients who are, I got clients across the globe, and I'm like working with people in
Yeah.
all their places, and I'm like, what do I know about running an inn? But here I am advising people on how to like do their marketing. Who I would never have guessed it. And so like, I do marketing consulting, and then, I've recently had an opportunity to start another company, a tech company, and we're working on, with, we're kind of like a, see, this is where it gets complicated, and I guess in 1 minute, we're a vendor of, my company's a vendor of products, and so we're working on getting a couple products launched and into our retail network, because I have a couple partners who have like an extensive network, and that's also, that's another thing that's kind of a culmination of my time at Shoreline, and my relationships there. But like, so I've got several different things going. I've got another, there's another startup I've been working with as well, doing marketing with. That's kind of, still waiting to get its feet under it, and that's a completely different world. And I was working on a docuseries this summer, and still working on closing out that project, and just kind of doing a little bit of everything, partly to make money, partly to.
Do you
Because I
see
want
like a
to.
common thread between them all that kind of bring them together for you? Like what makes them attractive for you?
What makes them attractive for me? I just, I like new things. I'm always been a person who likes change. I like to change things regularly. I don't like things to stay the same. I loved when we would get new desk assignments at school, because I liked to move and be in a different part of the room. I hated classrooms where we were in the same place the whole year. And like, that's just who I am. And so that part of it is the novelty of it, and getting to work on new projects and getting to do new different things. Like the film project was new, and I have some experience. I've got experience doing film stuff. I mean, that's what I do for you. And I did that Shoreline too, but like, it's just undertaking a documentary. I've never done that. But also like, I also just, really enjoy business in a way that I didn't know I did, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I like putting them together, and I like organizing them, and I love spreadsheets, and I like doing budget
like,
projections.
You did keep us, like, I remember at Shoreline, you were like the master of schedules and processes and systems.
I love processes and systems and logistics. It's something that I knew I learned I was really good at from an early age. Because did you know, you probably don't know this, when I was 12, I was coordinating VBS. At Shoreline. I was like the assistant coordinator at that time. There was like me, and then the adult who would be the actual enforcer. But like, I was planning everything, doing routes and schedules, and like that's something I learned at a really young age. It's something I'm good at, and I like to do. And like, it's getting to work with startups like this too is something, there's a lot to figure out logistically, and it's a puzzle. It's fun. I enjoy it a lot.
Well, you're good at it. You really are good at it. So now, as you look out, like I love talking to people who are in different seasons of life than I am, and so you're a young guy. You're still looking at a lot of your life ahead of you. When you think about what's happening in the church and what it looks like for this quote unquote next generation, what are some of the things that you're like excited about, you're optimistic about, and then maybe some of the things that you're like, I don't know.
Oh man, how controversial do you want me to go, Pete? Because we can go there. The things that excite me, oh man. I mean, I think the American church has been stuck for a really long time, and I'm anti-evangelical in many ways, and so there's a lot of things I think that we've been doing in the last 50 years that are not um, advantageous for the gospel. And part, but like this question is the one that sent me down this like discovery and learning about traditions and trying to understand too, like, and one of the things I'm unraveling from my past is like this idea of the right way to worship or the right way to spread the gospel, or what's the real church. We hear that. I think we're hearing a lot of that in 2025, but what's the real church, or whether it's the Protestants or like Catholics don't know what they're talking about, or Catholics or like Protestants know what they're talking about, or whatever. And so like even to that question and trying to peel apart theologically and philosophically and experientially, like, what is church, and like why does church, and what is the gospel, and why does the gospel, and how do people spread it, and why is it the same, or is it different than it was 2,000 years ago, and should we be doing church like they, there was this kind of call to, let's do church like the apostles did it, and like, is that, I was like, that sounds like a good goal, but then I like sat with it and I was like, should we do church that way? Like, is there a reason? Is it bad that we do church the way we do church? And I say I'm anti-evangelical, but I do like the way we do church. It's what I grew up in. I enjoy it. I'm not like turn down the lights and get that fog machine out of there. I think there's space for it, and so like.
Now, when you say anti-evangelical, for those who may not be familiar with the term, because I think we've had enough conversations about it, or I think I know where you're headed with that, but just like unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that? Like
there's so much to unpack there, but just like the general evangelical doctrine and the evangelical, there's the evangelical church, which kind of arose in the last 70 years. The modern evangelical movement, right? There's deeper roots to it, but it's kind of amalgamation of the Baptist tradition and the Pentecostal tradition with its charismatic elements, and it's got its deep dogmatic and doctrinal elements too, and this kind of more modern, and it's the root of this non-denominational movement too, right? And that was started with like Billy Graham, and goes forth in today, and the biggest churches in America today are all non-denominationals, right? Mm-hmm. And so this kind of non-movement, but there's some key there's some key dogmas, I would call them, beyond doctrine, not doctrines, because there's separate, this is a deep conversation, Pete, but separating, the levels of doctrine, but I'll call these doctrines dogmas, separating out there's some certain specific dogmas to the evangelical belief, and there are also some certain practices, like the practice of tearing down tradition and being like, we don't need to do it that way, or just because it is an entrenched position, like it's that somehow it's wrong, like it's too rigid and too religious. And I've heard that a lot in my life about being anti-religious. I'm a Jesus follower, but I'm anti-religious. And at one point in my life, I associated with that idea, like it's a relationship, right? That T-shirt, relationship over religion. Yeah. But now I'm definitely think I lean more religion in my ideas, and I think that there's a strong place for religion. And so like even being part of my anti-evangelical is rejecting that idea that religion is a bad thing, or like I don't like what's the word I don't like, come on, Pete, you preached this before. You know what I'm talking about. I don't like the what's the rigid, the legalism. Yeah. I don't love legalism. Yeah. But I do like structured religion and tradition. Well, and the reason I'm kind of pressing you on it, because on one hand, you are a like systems process guy, that you appreciate order and you appreciate like clarity. But on the other hand, when I hear you talk about it, you're like, but I also love mystery. And I think we don't have enough appreciation for mystery, or we don't have enough appreciation for history. And I feel like we haven't even touched on that in this top conversation. So it's kind of like an interesting mix that you have of that, and that's why I've asked you to unpack it. It's not controversial to me, because I feel like you found a way to integrate it all.
But
I've walked back those things, yeah, and like it is. I do agree, it's interesting because, especially with the church tradition I was raised in, is, and but then also like I am very rigid in my thinking, but at the same time, like my earliest religious experiences, my transformative moment, my spiritual moments are steeped in that mystery and that mysticism of like, how can I be standing in this room in a like in the middle of the forest in South Texas, but I'm also standing, next to Jesus, and like, these things that these weird moments in my life, and it's learned too,
Yeah.
and I think is what I'm trying to say, and like it's something I've had to evaluate because I've also had some other really interesting moments, just with God and in weird places, like, well, not so weird, it's pretty, like, I guess, pretty cliche. I was standing on the top of a hill in Ireland, and I had a vision and of what God was doing, and like, and that's a weird mystical moment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so like, having to reconcile having weird mystical moments, but also being very, scientific in my own approach to life, and like analyzing, and so having to figuring out how to like make those things work inside myself has been a challenge, but it's also, I think it has produced something weird.
Well, I love it. I think it's beautiful, and I appreciate the way that you're so thoughtful about these matters, and that you really have carved out a path for you that, as I have encountered you, very authentic. It's just like, this is like, I'm not necessarily trying to fit into any box, and I'm not really trying to make anybody happy. Not that I'm trying to be, purposefully offensive either. It's just like, I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm trying to be authentic about what I know and believe. And it's one of the reasons I feel like, you have something to say to this generation.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah. Where do we? Because we went off track there. So
I told you that at the beginning. We can do that.
You did. You took me. We went and I had explained some anti-evangelicism. We were talking about the future of the church. No, I think this is going to be controversial. I think that in some ways the church is imploding, and I think that's a good thing. The modern church. I think the American church, while I have been examining, different ways of understanding what church is, but I think that there is some collapse to the way we do church and to the non-existent traditions. And maybe that's what's part of the problem, is there are no traditions to hold to, and that's creating some collapse. But COVID definitely helped do it. And the political climate is definitely helping do it, or at least pull people apart and pulling the church apart. And I think that while is a painful thing, and it's causing a lot of strife, and it's going to cause a lot of hurt to people, I think it's also a good thing in that it's causing people to re-examine their beliefs. And because I'm also just one piece of this whole deconstruction movement that kind of began even right around the same time I was like, the reason I am the way I am today is because I started reading the Bible and understanding it. And I learned how to read my Bible, and it caused me to,
Pardon me,
to re-examine lots of things that I had thought I knew about life and about the Bible, and understand the Bible, and also trying to like reconcile parts of the Bible that I've read with my understanding of who God is. And so, like, all of those things, like, just have been working and doing things, and I think that's something that's really good for the church, the American church, the global church, to think about doing things differently. Because I think that in the history of the church too, the worst times for the church has been when it's been too staunchly in its traditions, right?
Yeah.
And too entrenched.
It does
in its
seem like we go
beliefs.
back and forth.
I gave a sermon at a youth camp one time, and I was probably really informed by this topic, but about the balance of spirit and truth, and about the balance of the mystical and the balance of the knowing and the present reality, and like finding that, walking in that middle line. And that's where the church needs to be, right? It's not too charismatic, it's not too dogmatic, it's not too apart from the world. I know that's a bad one because I don't even believe that. There's no such thing as too close to the world, because we are entrenched in it, and we should be. And like, that's one of my thoughts too, is like, I think that when the church gets stuck in these places where people think they know what it should be, and I think that the gospel itself is this living, breathing thing, spirit that goes forth, and it in itself, this is a controversial idea. Some people might take offense, but that the gospel the gospel itself, because like the gospel comes in and creates transformation within people, right? And it changes who we are. But I think that also in the same way that the gospel changes us, and takes away some of the worst parts of, smooths out the worst parts of our edges, we change the gospel. And I think that's even more true on like, because the Bible doesn't say you a lot, it says y'all a lot, right? It's a community driven thing, and like in the community sense, like the gospel comes in and transforms culture and nation and groups of people, and it changes them from what they were into something different. But it doesn't completely it's not a force that removes who those people were, right? It's not like, there was this movement I know from the 90s and the 2000s of like this, like everyone should, like if the whole, like the preachers would be like, if everybody followed Jesus, we would be all the same. And it would be like, and like there's a certain way to have culture, and there's a certain way to live your life, and there's a certain way to do things, and the gospel brings about this mono-ethnic culture thing. And I don't believe that. I think that the Bible clearly paints a picture of a multi-ethnic, multicultural amalgamation of people coming to the temple of God, and then in the same way that the gospel comes in, changes a group of people, but is also changed by who those people are. And when it goes forth again to the next group of people, it is inherently different in some ways. And then it goes forth, and like the church in itself is ever evolving in this idea of what the gospel does and how the people who last held the gospel took it forward, because I think it also isn't something that exists independently of who we are. Yeah. It's something that we hand to each other, and we accept the salvation together, right? It's these things about me, but it's something that we all have to do together.
Well, and I think that part of what I think you're touching on is the tension of like there are certain things about the faith that remain consistent. And then there are certain things that are always evolving, like the Lord, prophet said, I'm doing a new thing, mm-hmm. which he's always doing a new thing. So it's that figuring out like what's the essential, like what do I need to continue holding on to regardless of what happens in the culture, and then where is there room for creativity? Where's there room for a new expression? and we can talk about it philosophically, but in practice, that's really hard to sort out. And but I think we have to hold the tension for sure.
And I think it's in that. I think there's a looseness that we should approach it with. Like we shouldn't be too rigid in those things. And I know that's that rigidity in those things that doesn't allow the gospel to do those things. And at some point that thing breaks. And historically we see it happen, and something new comes out of it. No. And because the gospel isn't stopped, right? God doesn't stop moving, and then there is salvation to a new group of people, and it looks different afterwards, and sometimes we chase after that, and we probably should be chasing something that looks completely different than what happened before, because God did say I'm going to do a new thing.
Well, I have loved this conversation. Thank you for being willing to move on the other side of the camera and philosophize with me for a bit. It's great to have you as a guest, and I want to say thank you to you all for joining us for this conversation. And we are going to there's a lot of things that we talked about today that we want to give you an opportunity to interact with as well. And so if there are questions that come up as a result of what you've seen and heard, we'd love to interact with that. And so we always try and leave those opportunities in the notes. So wherever you're seeing this, please feel free to comment, like, share, and even disagree. Like that's okay too. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next week for another Sidewalk Conversation.